Unmatched Gaming Podcast. Here we share games. I'm your host, Tyler Barrett.
And I'm your host, Zach Short.
Zach, today we are drinking Fortunate Son, a dry hopped Saison from Logsden Brewing.
I love Saisons.
I love Saisons. This one's not very funky or sour.
You know what? It's
Most
not.
of the flavors are pretty subtle in that.
I like it. It's great. It does have that kind of, you have the bitter hops at the end, but like right before that, you got that nice little just reminder that it's a Saison.
Yeah, but even the hop, I'm not saying I dislike it. It's quite good, but it's way more subtle than I thought a Saison would be or a hopped beer would be.
Well, we also live in Austin, so it's like we have Jester King, which is like the king of the funk in terms of all of their farmhouse styles. So I mean,
I should really drink more Jester King.
That's
farmhouse
correct.
is my favorite. And
you know what my favorite of theirs is actually? It's one that's just always available, and it's called No Whales Here. It's just like this. It's a lavender.
I've really only had 2 of their beers.
I'll bring that one over. I think I have a bottle. It's delightful.
Cool.
It's good stuff. But hey, dude, we're starting a series.
We are starting a series all month. We'll be playing horror games because it's October and that's obligatory.
It's obligatory, absolutely.
Yeah.
But what we're gonna do with this series specifically, that's gonna be kind of interesting, is that you and I are going to be kind of doing the survey of kind of the big heavy hitters in each kind of section of this space, the horror space.
In those 4 sections, we've got really what we consider to be masterpieces. We've got
or like that are generally considered to be masterpieces.
Yeah, generally. I think there are very few people that would argue the 2 we're going to talk about today. So we've got masterpieces. We've got some indie hits. A lot of interesting stuff happens there.
Yeah.
And there's likely going to be overlap in all of these things.
Of course, yeah.
Because one of the masterpieces is Amnesia,
yeah.
which is a smaller indie game. So indie hits, we've got some obscure stuff or maybe forgotten. Do we want to mention what we'll be talking about?
I think we will as we go along.
Okay, sure. So really obscure stuff or otherwise forgotten horror games, and then big blockbusters. Those have a place too, but again, there might be overlap because Dead Space is a huge blockbuster.
Yeah,
which
correct.
we'll also be talking about this week.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, especially for me because I'm very illiterate when it comes to the horror genre in video games. It's not a space that I spend a lot of time in, which is funny because my wife grew up on this stuff. This is when her dad would play games with her. She grew up. She'll tell me I grew up on Mario 64 and Resident Evil. Like that was what they played together, and it's so funny to see, her trying to share games with me, and I'm still making my way through it. But her favorite game of all time is probably Resident Evil 4. And so, seeing those games and playing them with her is really the only experience I have with horror. There are a couple titles that I've played that I enjoyed and some that I played and kind of, put to the side. So this is going to be kind of new for me. So it's going to be fun to kind of maybe invite new listeners, any listeners into this space, kind of see like which aspect you might want to come in at, which angle might sucker you in. And then even for vets, people who have played a lot, it's just fun to maybe push into new places you haven't been in this genre yet.
Mm-hmm. I love horror games. I don't play as many as I'd like to, though I'm about to. I really just like horror in general. Anywhere I can get it. It's very odd. I was a kid who was not scared of nightmares, but would rather have a nightmare.
You're so weird.
Yeah, it's very weird. And in fact, I remember the first time I came close to lucid dreaming, I was like 11 years old and I had a nightmare. Like, wow, that was really interesting. I want to revisit that. And for 3 or 4 nights, not only did I revisit and have the exact same dream, but basically had episode 2 of that dream. And then the next night I would have 1, 2, and 3. Like the same dream continued.
That is so
same
weird.
Dream continued even longer. It was very odd. But I really like horror. I like to be spooked. I like to be stressed out. And I really like to feel, to experience that sort of disempowerment.
Sure, but it kind of pushes, and I definitely have more experience with horror films. Not contemporary ones so much, but a lot of the classics. I've seen a lot of the classics when it comes to horror, and it does push, stories and storytelling and kind of what you get out of that experience in a way, in a direction, I guess, that you don't get out of other genres. The Shining does something that other films, other stories don't. I'd even classify True Detective has a lot of horror elements in it, despite not being a horror show explicitly. And you look at his inspirations. I mean, it's that kind of the new weird fiction genre that he really pulls from, and a lot of horror there.
Now that you mention that, so does another HBO film, the one about androids, Westworld. The first season of Westworld also has a lot of that in there.
Yeah, and I think that there are elements in horror that kind of push into experiences and touch on certain themes that you just can't really deliver on without pushing that angle, that fear angle, that disempowerment angle you were talking about. So it's really going to be interesting to see what games can do with it, especially considering they're so immersive typically, and just, the whole kind of player versus, player playing a game experience and that interaction and what that can bring about. So just clarify, I'm not that illiterate with horror games. Like my favorite horror game for sure is Resident Evil 2 Remake. I love that game. I think it's fantastic. I also, I've played the GameCube version of Resident Evil. I've played a couple kind of smaller titles as well, that aren't kind of the big heavy hitters. I started Dead Space a long time ago, so I do have a little bit of a feel for what's going on, but it's going to be pretty fresh for me.
Good. I'm very happy to hear that. And I hope by the end of this month, when you have become very well acclimated with the horror genre in video games, maybe I can get you to watch some contemporary horror.
It's not for me, I don't think, man.
Come on,
he likes stuff like Midsommar,
Hereditary, Midsommar. Oh my god!
Suspiria
oh
remake.
My god! The Suspiria remake.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the only thing it has in common is that it's witches that run a ballet school. That's it. Yes, that one. Oh my god! Can we please watch that? Those are some of my favorite movies. And the way
versus me, who's like, oh yeah, let's watch like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Yeah. Like those are my favorite movies.
The way you talk about Eyes Wide Shut.
Oh god, that movie.
This only just came to my mind because of the way you talk about that. I want you to watch The Killing of a Sacred Deer even more, because it is not a horror movie, but what you got, I think you would have similar feelings to that movie as you did to Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah, and just for people listening, like Eyes Wide Shut, for some reason in me, every time I watch it, I might think it's Kubrick's best film. It just shakes me to my core when it ends. Like, it's not like a moment. There's not this like specific scene that just, like, even the the crazy orgy scene or anything, like none of that stuff shakes me.
But it's not even that crazy, by the way.
It's not.
That was like way overhyped.
Yeah, there's not actually much in there. Overhyped. The orgy scene was overhyped.
Tyler say it like that.
No, but seriously, like that movie ends, and that final line from Nicole Kidman, and I just get shook hard. It just, everything comes crashing down, all that stuff. And so I don't know. I think that is my favorite horror movie, which it's not a horror movie really.
I know,
but
because of that,
impacts me like one.
Oh my god! I want to watch
even
The Killing
The
of a Sacred
Shining
Deer.
hasn't done that to me. Like, The Shining doesn't do that to me. Like,
I'm taking Tuesday off. Come over on Tuesday to watch The Killing of a Sacred
Deer. I work a
Deer.
normal person job.
I know. Come over afterward, because then I'll be watching the debate.
Beautiful. No, let's move on.
Let's do.
What is kind of like for you, because another thing we're going to try to do with this series is move into shaping a definition for ourselves as kind of unpatched. What is a horror game?
Now,
like, what constitutes
ourselves as unpatched? Because I was just thinking about myself as Tyler.
Well, sure, that's fine. I mean, I feel like, if you come to one and I come to one, if they're a little different, we just kind of like hash it out and talk about it. Sure. I think that's going to be a good exercise, So, yeah, let's talk about what do you, Tyler, right now? What is your kind of scope for horror?
There's a few things I'm looking for when I'm looking for a good horror game. And I think it's very difficult for a good horror game to not incorporate most of, if not all of these things. So first of all, we've got atmosphere. I think every good horror game, it builds its world and crafts the emotions it's trying to elicit in a way that digs its talons in you over time. I think
oppressive, probably.
Oppressive is a big deal. I didn't write that down as a bullet point or keyword, but an oppressive atmosphere typically helps. Not always. I've not seen a game that does this yet, but Midsommar is exactly the opposite. It's sunny the entire time. There's flowers everywhere, and this really familiar.
Yeah, Wicker Man horror.
Sure, I haven't seen Wicker Man.
Dude, both are great. The first one because it's actually good. The second one because it's a Nicolas Cage movie and therefore is good by definition.
Okay. So I don't think that's always a must. That oppressive feeling, but I haven't seen a game not do that yet. Do something
Sure.
like Midsommar. So yeah, atmosphere is huge. I think many success, if not all, really successful horror games use unsettling imagery and themes. Again, I just haven't seen one that plays on that like Midsommar. That's the huge juxtaposition. So anytime something is, a horror piece of media is trying to do something different, that's sort of where I will go. But yeah, unsettling themes and imagery. I think the roaches in Dead Space, the roaches in Amnesia, the whispers in Dead Space.
Oh, the clickety clacking sound in Amnesia.
Yeah. I didn't finish that article this morning though. Someone just a few days ago, I think on The Verge, for the 10th anniversary of Amnesia, wrote a very long article about the roaches and just how impactful they are in that game.
Yeah, we'll talk about
it. Did you read it?
No, I didn't get to.
Okay. So the whispers in Dead Space, and even this is not a horror game, but this is a huge horror element. The Ratman layers in Portal 2. I think that those are very effective, and everything about them, like the tone of the game shifts as soon as you step behind one of those walls, and things become very unsettling. The music and the imagery in those places.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I mean, it's just like any genre. You can get the elements of that genre in other things, in other media, in other places. Mm-hmm. It's more of a pastiche a lot of the times, especially in modern media. So
one of the biggest things for me is the sound design, the music and the actual sound effects, the voice work.
Dude, Dead Space.
It's a big deal, and this is true of video games in general. I think sound is one of the greatest ways to immerse.
It's also a great tool to use either against or for the player.
Yes, I think sound has always been one of the most important things in the experience of a game to me. So, when people talk about, this is a good podcast game, I can just play it while I'm podcasting, while I'm listening to a podcast. I don't find that to be true. I've tried a couple times, but even if it's just the falling of a block in Tetris,
I can't really do that.
I want to hear all of it. So sound design is a huge thing. Let's see. Oh, the absence of sound also. Like that would be part of sound design, but you can use the absence of those things to work in your favor and create that atmosphere as well. And finally, there's a few things here just about the way that the player feels when they're playing a horror game. I think most horror games do this pretty well, or the successful ones. It's difficult to create a horror game, I feel, without stripping the player of some of their power. And I think Dead Space strikes an interesting balance there that we'll get into. Let's see. I think giving the player unconventional means of survival is also a big deal in horror games. Just giving the player a gun, I don't think is always the best. We're going to talk about Resident Evil later this month, and I've only played 2 Resident Evil games. I've played RE4 and I've played RE5. And yes, they have horror tropes, but I played RE4 when I was a kid, so my memory of that game is probably a little skewed. But 5 I was like 17 or something. I wouldn't call that game a horror game. At least 5. It's got a jump scare or 2, but otherwise it's just an action game with zombies. That's about it.
That's interesting.
You punch a boulder in a volcano to kill the boss. That's not a horror game. Have you played that?
Of course.
It's very silly.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't call RE5 a horror game. Maybe 4. I won't speak definitively on that. But I think stripping the player of a lot of their power and giving them unconventional means of survival, be that just running away because you can't defend yourself, or distracting enemies, something like that. Like in Amnesia, you can pick up rocks and things, bottles to throw them and distract the monsters. I think that's pretty important. And scarcity of resources.
That's a big, yeah.
That's a big deal, and I think Dead Space
RE4
also
is
strikes
probably my favorite example
really,
of
yeah.
that because it's dynamic. Have you know the dynamic difficulty of Resident Evil 4? That way, no matter how good you're doing, you always feel like you never quite have enough.
Yeah,
just never quite have enough.
I didn't finish it this playthrough. I played Dead Space when it came out, but I didn't get around to finishing it for this cast. I played just over half of it again, but there's a very particular balance I think it strikes there.
It does an excellent job.
Yeah, I'm very happy with what I did get to play. I hope I have time to go back and finish it before next week.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think those are some elements that, when woven together, craft a very successful horror game.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, yeah, so for me, I think it's a lot looser. I think, playing specifically these two games, we'll talk about this more at the end, it just absolutely completely different games, Dead Space and Amnesia. These is what we picked for
which is why I poked them. I poked them.
You poked them.
I picked them.
Yeah, and I think...
Which is why I picked them.
Yeah, I think, we talked a lot about what should go here.
Mm-hmm.
A lot. We considered RE4. We considered... we considered a couple other games as well, but I'm glad that we settled on these because I think they really elicit the beginning of this conversation of what is a horror game perfectly.
Yeah.
Because they're so opposite from one another in a lot of ways, and yet both are still horror games. So, yeah, for me, obviously, not having this experience, I have a very loose definition. There's a lot that goes into it. I do think a lot of it has to do with the disempowering of the player in a lot of ways. I think just a horror game should elicit the two things. You get the base animalistic response, that fight or flight.
Yep.
Dead Space does it really well, by having an enemy when you're fighting it. If you back up too far, another will spawn behind you or something, like that. You hear the sound, you go, I am now trapped. And you have that moment of, oh man, like I need to get out. I need to figure out what's going on. You just start booking it, I think that goes a lot into a horror game, but then I also think a horror game should elicit something, or a good one, I think, should elicit kind of the more critical thinking aspects of your brain. And, it's the way I describe The Shining. Like, somebody goes, oh, I've heard The Shining is the scariest movie ever. I'm like, no, because a lot of people come in looking for that paranormal activity kind of scary.
Yeah.
And that's not the kind of scary The Shining is. The Shining gets under your skin, and it makes you think, and it pushes your brain pushes the buttons of your brain to make you start thinking about something in a different way.
I think this is very important. Entering into a horror experience with a particular expectation, the sort of spooks you get from paranormal activity are pretty generic, I think.
I think generic's the wrong word. I'd say passing.
Sure. But the sort of experience you particularly, I think you're in the minority here, but I appreciate the idea. The sort of experience you get when you watch Eyes Wide Shut, or
sure, yeah, that's not a base fight or flight kind of thing.
I might not totally disagree with you if I watched it again, because I had similar feelings watching American Beauty this week. Is it American Beauty?
Yep.
American Beauty this week, and it really got to me.
Because, and specifically with American Beauty, which I've not actually seen all the way through. It's one of my biggest sins in terms of movies I haven't seen, but very familiar with the film. And, it's because it undermines the suburban America ideals in so many ways. Those things that specifically people like you and me are so accustomed to in a lot of ways. It really actively undermines those and gets under your skin. Gets under the things that you've accepted as normal and good and okay.
Yeah. I didn't know what I was getting into with this. I thought I knew the basic premise, and the first half hour of that movie, I'm like, what am I watching? This won awards? This is so cheesy. What is this stock music from 90s Disney films? It's so intentional.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so good. There's a very explicit moment where it shifts gears. That movie is so good.
Yeah.
But, when I think you should go into a horror experience with particular expectations, and maybe I think people will get a lot more out of horror if they can allow themselves to become, as maybe you said, like literate in these sort of experiences. Because if you're just looking for that passive jump scare that you might get from,
or sometimes not even jump scares, just gross out. It's the
sure,
freaky,
the shock
the
value,
freaky moments.
Yeah.
The
If that's what you're looking for, sure.
There's plenty
But
of that.
there's, even from the experiences that offer that, there's so much more there that you can get. Like Dead Space. Dead Space is a blockbuster title. But if you allow yourself to go in there looking for more, it's there.
Yeah, I think Dead Space, devil's in the details in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that a little more. But yeah, I think for me, my definition is a little bit more kind of simplistic and broad. I think a horror game should make you uncomfortable in the right ways. A horror game should make you uncomfortable in a way, either, mechanically, either in the gameplay itself, in the ideas and the themes and the atmosphere. Any of that stuff should push the player into a realm that they're not comfortable in some way. And I think that's pretty loose, and in terms of definition. I'm hoping these games will help kind of hammer that into a more, I guess, helpful and useful and interesting statement. Something that I can hand to someone that I'm talking to and go, you know what? Horror games are hard to define, but I think this gives a good handle for you to, grab onto.
Yeah, my definition is a little more in depth there for sure. What I'd like to do one day is apply that to Luigi's Mansion.
I think that's a great idea.
I don't know when I'll get around to playing it because I've never finished it.
That's unfortunate. My save file on my memory card for my GameCube has 18 times that I beat that game with my brother.
Wow.
Like, between us, we beat it 18 times.
That
game's great.
Had a GameCube for a while, like several months without a memory card. So it was that and Pikmin I had.
So you have as far as you can get in a day before your parents make you stop.
Yeah.
And then that's how far you can get into the game.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And then, friends come over and they want to play Smash or something, so I got to turn it off.
Yeah.
Several months without a memory card. So I never got around to finishing it. By the time, I lost interest and I sold it or something. Cause
remember memory cards?
I remember memory cards, yes.
It's the worst thing that ever happened to gamers. God.
I was just thinking about memory cards like 2 or 3 days ago.
That does not surprise me.
Because I was playing on the Switch. And there's no save files. I can't save anything for many games. Like I wanted to save part of Transistor and go back to a different file. But also, you could trade those things. You have a copy of the game. I don't need to bring my console. Just bring my memory card and we can play.
Now we got the cloud.
You've got the cloud. Yeah, but you've got to log into your...
Sure, of course.
Your
There's
account.
still some hassle.
Yeah, but Xbox has memory card.
That's true.
Series X has memory card.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I like memory cards.
I'll tell you right now, I loved Metroid Prime so much, but I loved the final 3 bosses of the game. The Omega Pirate.
Yeah.
Ridley. And the Meta Ridley. And then Metroid Prime. So what I did is so obviously when you beat the game, you're at that last save station and you can just go fight Metroid Prime again. I believe that's the case. But what I did is I beat the game 3 times, all on veteran, where I got to the save right before the Omega Pirate, save right before Ridley, and save right before Metroid Prime, so that I could go back and so my memory card B was for my refights when I wanted to refight one of the bosses, and A was for when I wanted to play the game again all the way through.
Cool.
Yeah, that was some diligent work right there.
Also, Game Informer did this like 3 episodes, but I have an entire box over there. That box is just full of memory cards. So they used to do memory card excavations. They would just get used memory cards, plug it in, see what games are there, and go get it off the shelf. See the characters that these people have built in Tony Hawk or something like that, or just sort of where this player stopped. How many, they'd be able to see that and sort of gauge, oh, this person just likes these bosses a lot. That seems fun.
Yeah.
Seems like an interesting thing to do.
So yeah, that's kind of the goal of what we're going for, though, in terms of the horror. So let's just jump into it.
Okay, yes, let's do.
No,
Mr.
but for
DeFranco.
real, let's do Dead Space, man. So again, I played the first hour of Dead Space ages ago.
That little? Oh,
yeah, I did not play very much of it, and I didn't stop for any other reason than there was a bug. I was playing on PC, and there's a bug that you can't get through a certain door, and I did not care enough at the time to try to fix it. I just immediately moved on to the next thing I was going to play.
I think there's another bug. Before I forget, I want to mention this. It's very odd. I've never experienced this before. So I think the mouse is like super fast and like hard to control.
Extremely, yeah.
So I think it's balancing the mouse sensitivity of the game, but also like multiplying it by the mouse sensitivity of your system. So there's like a weird balancing there. I have my mouse sensitivity turned all the way down on Dead Space, and it's still like pretty fast.
That's crazy.
Did
you play with a controller, or did you play?
I plugged the controller in just after I started because the mouse was pretty weird, and I didn't quite like it. But after getting so far, and trying to remember what I played 12 years ago, I think a controller might be better. Because I think
any sort of third-person shooting kind of game, I always go controller.
I typically do as well, but I found the mouse to be good. I enjoyed using the mouse, but the mouse gives you so much freedom. I think the controller would add to the intended sort of tankiness of the controls.
Yeah, I had a blast with the controller. I used the Pro controller.
If I have time to go back and finish it, I'll probably try it with the controller again, because I was only thinking about this morning when writing about the tank controls, and I just think the controller. If you played Dead Space, try it with the controller. I think it might be better. It might better suit the experience. That is.
Yeah, I mean, I had no problems. I had a blast. But so basically, the intro kind of to Dead Space, though, for anyone who either is not familiar or hasn't played it. You're essentially this came out, and very shortly after Resident Evil 4, they initially pitched it as kind of this System Shock, not sequel, but kind of spiritual successor.
Oh, that's why I was so confused. I thought you were saying that about RE4.
No.
Also, I think this was 4 years after. Wasn't RE4 in 2004?
Yeah, shortly after. I think Dead Space in 2007.
No, 8.
Okay, yeah. So
4 years is
shortly
a decent
after.
amount of time.
It's in terms of game development, that's pretty much immediately after, because Dead Space took 3 years to develop. It's a brand new IP.
Sure.
But yeah, I'd say that basically that game came out, and it kind of Resident Evil 4 came out, and it kind of changed the direction of the game in a lot of ways. So it's Resident Evil 4 in space, and the developers very proudly say that. It's not like bashing them at all to say that. They're very proud that they made Resident Evil 4 in space. You got the puzzles. You got the fun little boss mechanics to try to beat the bosses. You've got the third-person shooting mechanics, although it's a lot more, it's not as tanky, and it's as Resident Evil 4, you don't have to stop to shoot. It's a little bit more dynamic, and that lets them kind of get different kinds of scares in. It's really interesting, really fun. But yeah, essentially you're an engineer sent to go repair the ship. It's a big mining vessel that mines rocks out of the planet with big old gravity beams and stuff, and you arrive, and they've excavated something that everybody's now turning into these zombie creatures called necromorphs, and you have to fix the ship and try to get off somehow. It's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward, but
there's also some occult elements in there. Some people are like worshiping this thing that they took from the planet, and one of the, I guess, villains, I don't remember what exactly becomes of him, but he's trying to sort of allow this future evolution of mankind to happen, become this necromorph hive mind.
Yeah, and so he makes this, we'll talk about it, he makes an unkillable one that chases you through portions of the game that I think is one of the strongest parts of the game for sure. I think it adds a lot in the right ways. And then we'll talk about how those arcs kind of end, but I really like a lot of what they do with that creature. But anyway, I kind of want to move on and talk about how the theme is very simple. You're an engineer, and it's never explicitly stated. Isaac, the main character, never talks. He never talks at all in this game. And he does in later ones, though, right? 2 and 3, I believe he does speak.
I'm pretty sure he talks in 2.
Yeah.
Is Isaac in 3? I don't know much about 3. I only played 1 and 2.
Very unfamiliar with anything. Like, this is the one that interested me. I'm not sure I'll keep
playing. I'm
playing.
pretty sure he talks in 2.
Yeah, so he doesn't talk in this one at all. And what's really interesting, though, is you have him as an engineer using engineering tools and kind of crafting weapons for himself using very simple engineering concepts and stuff to make these really interesting. Like he turns kind of a hand saw into this thing that launches saws out at the enemies. He takes, he makes this really big, awesome cannon, and you can see like the electrical plates for conducting the electromagnetic forces, and just really cool.
I really like the scrappy design of the guns,
and you can see it like kind of like wired in on certain places. And he's an engineer, and he's making it the best he can out of what he's given.
I think there's 2 guns in there that are like explicitly guns. Right?
Yeah, like the pulse rifle, which everybody else is using the pulse rifle.
Yeah.
And then
the flamethrower, right?
The flamethrower is a flame, but he kind of builds it. Like it looks like he kind of put it together.
I didn't use it this time around. I only purchased the 4 guns, but I'm only using 2 of them really.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. So let's actually move right into that. A big portion of the game and a big portion of the replay value is the enemy design, the enemy placement, and the weapons that you use to attack them. Because the big draw of the game, obviously, a lot of people know this, is the dismemberment. You do more damage by cutting off the enemy's limbs than you do shooting them in the head or the body.
So great.
It's fantastic. It was a simple idea that was brilliant because all your guns, like the first gun, you get your plasma cutter and it has 3 dots, and you line it up and try to cut their limbs off.
And
to do max damage.
So you can press whatever the alternate fire button is, middle mouse button on.
So it'll either be
PC.
horizontal or vertical.
Yeah. It's a very thin line, like enough to cut someone's leg off, or depending on how far you're aiming, the dots, depending on how close the item is that you're aiming at, the dots sort of come in, or if it's very close to you, they're wider.
Yeah.
You can flip it horizontal or vertical and cut off arms and legs.
It's the main gun of the game. It's really fun.
If I ever play it again, it'll be just with that gun.
That'll be fun.
But
see, that's the replay value, is like mixing and matching the weapons and upgrading them and having fun and just, finding new ways to fight these enemies. Because the enemies, in my opinion, are what make the game so fun. Yeah. It reminds me, honestly, of Doom. In a lot of ways, because Doom, what makes Doom really fun is each enemy has a very unique pattern, very unique attack type. How they're supposed to be dealt with is very specific. But then you start mix and matching them. And this game does that.
Yeah.
This enemy, you deal with it in this way. Here's, and you learn a couple ways that are good for you based on the weapons you have. And then they introduce another enemy, and then they mix them. And then, it just kind of keeps escalating. It becomes fun, like really fun.
Yeah, I got myself killed once because I thought I was playing a different game. And I used the line gun. So that's just a super wide horizontal beam. Its alternate fire is like a little grenade, but
it's a little
who cares?
No, what do you mean? Who cares?
It's good.
No,
it is
what
good.
You do? You cut all their legs off with one shot, and then you shoot the mine just a little in front of them, so they're all crawling towards you, and it kills all of them.
Yes, it does. It is good. But what I did was cut all their legs off, so they're all crawling. Their elbows poke up just a little bit past their back, and you can use the line cutter to get like 1 or 2, but there were like 6 guys crawling at me, so I thought I was going to kneel down and line up a shot, but I didn't. I stopped, and I used the whatever the map mechanic is, which is the control button, but with every other PC game, control is to crouch, and I did that and died.
Yeah, that would do it right there. That's amazing, though. That's so funny. I really enjoyed that gun. But yeah, so let's just run through the guns real quick. You got the little plasma cutter that we talked about. You got the line gun. You have a little saw gun I was talking about. Mm-hmm. You can either launch the saw blade or hold it out at a specific distance.
Yeah, so he uses it with his... so there's 2 abilities that he has. One is... Stasis, which slows down time and enemies. Not time, but just like whatever's in this little cloud. So enemies will be drastically slowed if they're walking through this. And kinesis, which allows you to pick up items from afar. And, if it's consumable, you can pick it up while it's floating in front of you. Or if you've just killed an enemy, or knocked off one of their limbs, you can grab like the sharp bones from their limbs and throw them at them to conserve ammo. So he mixes, this is about the scrappy design, he combines that kinesis ability with the saw blade. So its default fire is to just launch a saw blade but levitate it like 5 feet in front of you. So you can just move it back and forth for like 10 seconds.
It's good for cleanup, yeah.
It's good for cleanup for sure. And then just launch it.
Yeah, you got a flamethrower.
What's the alternate fire on that?
Just a quick burst of flame
Oh.
instead of the continual stream. It's pretty boring. You got a pulse rifle, really strong, pretty boring. And then you get kind of this cannon that has a vertical kind of cutting fire. That I use that gun all through the end game. It one shots everything. I upgraded it all the way. Yeah, it's fantastic.
I didn't get that one yet.
So I used that one, and then there's also the
force
gun. So it just a beam of force that
it's
knocks
pretty
things
lame.
out. Yeah, I agree. I'm sure there's interesting ways to use it.
Probably.
But I did not.
Didn't like
I did not. Yeah, I didn't use it really. So I played most of the game. I used the plasma cutter, the line gun, the big cannon, and then the saw blades.
Okay, yeah, I'm using the saw blades, the force cannon, which I just have because I thought I was going to use it, and I haven't taken the time to purchase another one. The plasma cutter, which is the default weapon. Why would you switch that out? And the line gun, which is probably I haven't gotten the vertical slice as you've just mentioned, but so far I think the line gun is the best gun in the game.
Yeah, that's the one that I got the most use out of. But the problem is there's like never ammo for it, and it's like ammo. You only get 6 shots taking up an inventory spot before you have to consume another inventory spot for more ammo. So it's
But if you upgrade that damage, some enemies you can just kill with that single shot to the legs.
yeah, that's
which
what
means
I did.
you're killing like as many enemies are there in that line.
So we're talking about damage and upgrading. I want to mention that upgrading is not cheap.
No.
And the
No.
upgrade pieces are very scarce, and sometimes you have to place an upgrade slot on something that won't upgrade your gun. It's just the next spot in the
so
path
the idea
to your
is
next upgrade.
the like thematic idea there is you find these like
Power
power
nodes.
boxes on the wall and you extract a piece from it and then you can put it on the circuit board of your gun or your suit, whatever tools you're using. You just put it on the circuit board, and some of those circuits that connect to other functions are empty.
Yeah.
So like to get from damage 1 to damage 2 or health 2, just because
It's
your
like
base
4 or
default
5.
health is 1 on your suit. To get to health 2, there are 2 empty ones first.
Yeah, it's
I don't have my
expensive.
health upgraded at all yet.
Oh, I did it 3 times. I needed some health, boys.
I've got the line gun, and I think I've got like 1 upgrade in the suit, the stasis, and the kinesis, and then everything else is
But
in...
I searched everywhere. I bought some nodes, and they're expensive.
Yeah,
they are
quite.
expensive to buy. They're as much as a large health pack, which is the most expensive just consumable in the game.
Yeah.
And so yeah, they're really expensive. And I bought as many as I could, and I still only upgraded like 2 guns high, and then my health like up 3 out of the 4. I did not get that much, and part of that is New Game Plus. They want you to keep playing. They want you to go on this New Game Plus adventure and get your suit upgrades and all that stuff. So I get it. It's super cool. It's super fun. But I like that you can't just upgrade all the guns and be super.
You definitely
powerful.
can't do it all. And there's also some places in the game that are locked. You have to weld the circuit board or weld the power node to the circuit board of a door to unlock it. And sometimes it's not worth it. Sometimes the things behind that door, it's a gamble. Sometimes it's awesome. You get like 3 large health packs and I don't know, like a ruby semiconductor, which you can sell for a lot. So you get good stuff sometimes, but
Yeah.
it's a gamble. Definitely.
I definitely get that. I think it's a good system.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. But I want to talk also about how this game, as we've been talking about it, what have we not mentioned
Horror.
at all? It is so fun. The
Yes.
gameplay is on point. I think one of the things I mentioned here in my notes is that it's just fun to and they'll add a little gravity lift that kills whatever enters into it, and you get to play around with the enemies there, have to avoid it. They'll throw in a totally new enemy and you'll have to learn how to deal with it. They'll throw in a new segment of the game where now you have to solve these little puzzles. My favorite that I think is having to kill the unkillable enemy. I really enjoy those little segments where you have to I get what you have to do, and so you cut his legs off, but he's about to grow them back. You can stasis him, and then you go and
I didn't think to stasis him.
yeah, and then you go.
I
and
cut his arm as soon as I see him get ready, or I time it correctly. I'll cut off an arm. So then whatever that internal timer is happening, it starts over, and I'll try to cut off another arm. and then it
Wow.
happens immediately.
That's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you're supposed to do is he's chasing you down, and he keeps regenerating and regenerating. So you cut his legs off when he walks into this freezing chamber, and then you stasis him so he's slowed down, and you run and activate the freezing chamber, and he freezes into a million pieces.
Yeah.
The second time you have to fight him, you have to do the same thing, but then launch the shuttle rockets so that he burns up in the shuttle rockets. So those kind of Resident Evil-y puzzles bosses that are just really fun. It's just a fun game. You want to return to it. You want to keep coming back to it, which begs the question: is it a horror game?
Yes, and we'll get to that. I want to talk about my favorite enemy.
Oh, please, yeah.
Which is there's like these flying creatures that make corpses the necromorphs. So
and they make them into the strongest version of the base necromorph too.
And so there's these creatures that come around, and there's corpses all over the place because this is a huge spaceship that everyone has died. You've come to repair it. You've answered a distress signal, and by the time you get there, everyone's dead. So there are just corpses everywhere on the ship, and sometimes these enemies will come and infest the corpses and turn them into one of the enemies. But you can dismember anything. So as soon as I see I open a door and I see a corpse over there, I'll use kinesis to pull it over, which is why I upgraded the kinesis. I probably should do it again, but I'll pull it over to me and I'll just start stomping on it, which is one of the main mechanics in the game, is just a really hefty stomp.
Yeah.
Break boxes open, or
he's not stepping firmly. He is getting his
it's a full body
body
stomp
into this, and he's got these big, heavy, brass-looking boots.
It stops you for a minute. It takes a moment because it's a full body stomp. You got to get back in position. You've got these heavy guns, heavy suit.
Yeah, at
you
the
have to
beginning
lift
of the
yourself
game,
back up.
you'll cut a necromorph's legs off, and you think it's dead. You'll just go stomp them because you know they might get back up.
But you can also do that to conserve ammo because they take a moment to react after cutting off.
Yeah,
their,
so you
their
can
legs.
just stomp their limbs off, and it's a nasty. The sound design behind it, and
God.
Isaac will grunt every time he does it, and you just feel it reminds you of Kratos' axe. The weight behind that is just how much time probably went into making that stomp perfect.
Probably quite a bit.
The stomp is my favorite part of this game.
Yeah,
it's 10 out of 10. Stomp, best stomp,
10 out of 10,
best stomp,
best
in video
stomp.
games.
Would stomp again.
Would stomp again.
Yeah. So anytime I see corpses around, I'll just pull them over to me real quickly and start stomping on them. And I don't leave any limbs on there because you can decapitate it. Cool. It's still got 4 limbs. It's already undead, so it's just going to continue to be undead and run at you. So cut off the arms, cut off the legs, and you can leave the head. That's fine. But without limbs, it can't move around. So when the enemies come in to infect them, they're just looking around for dead bodies, and then I can kill them very easily.
Yeah, because they don't do anything to you.
But there are some areas, there are 7 of them, and then 2 of the enemies will come in to just start infesting them.
Yeah,
so
you'll get caught.
The first time that I outsmarted them was that gravity plate that has that has been lifted from the floor. So if you walk into this gravity section of the floor, it shoots you up on the ceiling and you die. But that's true of enemies too. So I was just pulling corpses and throwing them in there, and they just splatter on the ceiling.
Well, there's fun stuff too, like the zero gravity segments where you can launch yourself and be fighting upside down. And there's so much that went into making this game just exciting and fun to play. But
let's talk about that horror. Go ahead.
So let me tell you the moment that I realized this was going to be a horror game. Is because until that point I was like, this it's gross, but I've been so desensitized to gross and gory.
Other than just simple trappings.
Yeah, it has the horror aesthetic. Yeah, and it's okay, sure, it's zombie, necromorph, whatever. When you go out in space, the sound cuts out. There's just some light things that you can hear within your suit because you have a air system in your suit for oxygen, so you can hear within your suit.
Yeah, I was likening it to when you have wired earbuds in, anything that touches the wire you can hear transfer up the earbud.
Exactly,
that kind of thing.
So I was just walking and completing this puzzle, and all of a sudden I get slashed from behind, and I just jump, and my brain connects. Duh, you can't hear anything. So the second you go outside into space,
You're looking everywhere.
everywhere. I mean, you are genuinely scared that something is just gonna smack you.
Yeah.
And health is like most of the game I have half health. Like you're not stuck
Really?
up on health.
Are you playing on medium
Yeah,
difficulty?
I'm playing on medium. I mean, and part of it's that I won't heal right away, right? If I only have a medium health pack, I won't heal right away. Like I'll wait.
Yeah.
Because I might get a small health pack, which will do me fine. So part of it's not just like, sure, at the end game there were parts where I didn't have any health packs and I was just had low health, but you're not really at full health very often. Like you're not just let me use a health pack to get back to full health. Like you're just like, let me use a health pack and I'll get halfway there, and I don't want to waste the other one that I have in my inventory because it'll go over my health that I have now. I just want to keep it. So if you get attacked by a couple nasty enemies and you're not at full health, bada bing bada boom, you're dead.
Yep.
Like it's really, that's the moment where I was like, okay, this game's a horror game, because it uses that brilliant sound design. I was watching an interview with the devs, the one that you sent me ages ago, where they say the first thing we did was sound design. He said, a lot of games I've worked on, it's the last thing. You just use whatever memory's left for your sound design. He said that's the first thing we did was the sound design.
I forgot about that. I don't remember that entire interview. I forgot about that. By the way, that is War Stories by Ars Technica. Great series. It's just video game developers, lead designers talking about the hardships of that. So some key ones are the one on Dead Space.
Oddworld.
Oddworld is very good. What is that guy's name? I forget.
I always forget. The guy who does Oddworld.
Yeah,
he's great.
He's a great guy.
He's like your uncle who like visits once a year just because your parents think he's kind of weird, but he's actually the cool uncle, and your parents just don't want to admit it. He's that guy.
Yeah, he's pretty cool. And the one with the Civilization designer, Sid Meier's.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. Sid Meier is awesome. I love that guy.
Yeah, great series. Anyhow, sound design, super important, and I think that is one of the strongest points of this game. But it's something else I couldn't help from noticing is the aesthetic design. Not just bloody stuff, cool looking zombies, but there is a level of cohesion to this world's design that is hard to match. Everything in the world is built with a very particular aesthetic, and that is body horror. Even the architecture of the ship, like the pieces of metal that are building the ship, invoke spines. There's spines everywhere and like rib cages everywhere.
Like a bone structure.
Your rib is an exoskeleton.
Yeah.
And that's true of everything on the ship. The chairs, the part that like bends back, that allows you to bend back. That's a spinal cord for just like the desk chairs and things like that. And the ship itself is just like a giant rib cage. Like you see those huge pieces that come out of the ship when you get to see the outside of it. That's true across the board. And then there's very small things. I've been looking for them more because I only noticed it last night. But this is a super small detail that sort of adds to the cohesion of the design. There are some windows in the like plant, the nursery you go to, that are the same shape as the item slots. So even like the UI design is taking from the world a little bit, and then I think the full window for your UI is just like a physical window from the game.
Yeah, and that's really worth talking about, is that one of their fundamental design choices was no HUD. No heads-up display. Yep. All the information is conveyed to, like, the back of Isaac's suit is your health bar. The back of Isaac's suit shows you how much stasis charge you have left for your stasis slowdown stuff. All of that is there. You can see right here on his chest a little kind of weird portion of his suit that sticks out, that you realize, oh, that's the HUD that you see when you go into inventory. That's what he's looking at. Yeah. When he's watching videos, he's looking down there. But they'll just show it to you on the screen. They're not going to cut away. There are no cutscenes. Like, there's no...
Which is one of the earliest games that I remember noticing. This, there are no cutscenes. Everything is done in-game. It is not ripping you away from any part of the game.
There are some big climactic moments, and there's no cutscene. It's all just part of the game, and it looks great. It really keeps you immersed. So much went into it's called diegetic design. Like you're getting what the character is getting. There's no soundtrack. Like in a movie, the characters can't hear the soundtrack. But
unless they can. That's the only time I've heard that is diegetic like sound design in a movie.
Yeah,
I never thought about.
Yeah, never think about it in games, and it totally works here. You know,
most of the time.
What the player is seeing is, or what the character is seeing is what the player is seeing. It's just a part. It's built into the world.
Is not good.
I agree. I never looked at it.
Yeah, I looked at it twice.
Yeah, I just didn't look at it.
But a really interesting example of that, when I noticed it for the first time, because I mean, you can't help but notice it the first time you open the menu, because it's unlike anything I've seen before. I remember in 2008, I was like, oh my god! So often I would just like move the left stick to just sort of like move the menu around. Like, did you ever do this? Oh, excuse me. Did you ever do this with what's the second Smash Bros. Melee?
Where you just flip the C stick around?
Yeah, and it moves the menu. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah,
I just move it a lot. Just look at it because it's cool. But when you're talking to one of the characters who's like sick, he's in a hallway. The other character that has been video calling you the whole game pulls up on his HUD. And she's talking to both of you because she knows that you're present, but it pulls up on his HUD.
It's that consistency.
Yeah.
It's that, again, devil in the details. That's what really pushes this game far and above is those core decisions that we talked about, plus these additional details that they really put a lot of time into. And another reason that, the more I hear about 2 and 3, the less I'm particularly interested in them. I've heard that a lot more went into just, making it an action game and making it just kind of more what the market was doing at the time. So this game seemed just particularly special. I was surprised how much I enjoyed it.
I'm very happy you did. There's 2 things that I think I've been thinking about this recently. Like, what would Bluehole keep if they worked on this game? What would they leave it? Yeah, Blue Point is what I meant. Bluehole is a like swimming place I used to go to. Anyway, didn't come out.
Tell
of
us
nowhere.
more about that, Tyler.
Yeah, no. The point is that didn't come out of nowhere. I didn't pull that out of my blue hole. Okay, so Blue Point. Yeah, like what would they keep if they worked on this game? I think the 2 things they would keep is the sound design. It'd be remastered, sure, but they'd keep the sound design.
They would not change almost anything.
Yeah,
dude,
I don't think they keep the sound design.
Just when the airlock opens.
Yeah.
But
wow. I also think they would keep almost every model. Look at the guns. Just turning the
it looks
horizontal
so
and vertical mode for the plasma cutter is incredible. All of the I think it's probably like pretty low poly architecture, but applied in very incredible ways.
Absolutely.
I think they would keep the architecture of the ship and the suits. Maybe they would make the maybe they would change, or rather sort of spruce up the models of the enemies, but everything else in the ship, all of the harsh angles and like sharp metal, all of that is super intentional. I think they'd keep it all.
I love the enemy design in that, the more intense, stronger enemies are, instead of this fleshy pinkness, I was watching a video about this, they're black. Like they're kind of like, really,
they're rotting.
Yeah, rotted organic, material. And so if it's dark and they're running at you, you just see the glint off of their claws or their yellow eyes, and that's scary.
It is.
Like, especially the fast ones that just book it at you. There are some enemies that have been infected by the stasis in their suits, so now that they've transformed, they move incredibly fast because the stasis has reversed and messed them up. And so when they run at you, it's this insanely fast jittering animation that is so scary.
Yeah,
like it's
first time they run at you, you're like, oh my god, what's happening?
Yeah, you freak out. It's super good. Well, because the first time you see them, they're running away from you, and you're like, oh, that's really fast.
Yeah.
Like, it's really fast. And so they keep running away. And then you move with your kinesis. You move this massive pillar out of the way. And then it's just standing there, like, making eye contact with you. And it waits a second. Like, these guys are masters. It waits a second, and you're just, like, waiting. And then... and it just, like, starts running at you.
It's so good. But you mentioned something there, and they run away from you, which is oftentimes what happens. Through a segment of the game, the suspense will start to be built because you'll hear enemies in the rafters and the vents, or sometimes you'll see them run down a hallway and look at you and then, like, tear a piece of the wall off and crawl into the ventilation because they're going to get you somewhere else.
Yeah, they and I think where I'd like to talk about this when we start talking about Amnesia is the anatomy of a scare. Like, how in a video game do you build that scare up, and then how do you deliver on it? I think that's really interesting, but I think Dead Space, for the most part, does it really well. So yeah, I'd like to revisit that when we talk about Amnesia for sure.
For sure. And let's I don't have much more here. I think people get the point. Play Dead Space if you haven't. Even if you have, it's been 12 years.
It's
play
10
Dead
hours
Space
too. It's I finished it in, like, I think Steam said 9.8 hours. Like, I finished it real quick, and I explored and, like, grabbed as much as I could because you want to make sure you're equipped, you know. So I had a blast playing it. It's super short.
Ooh, one thing I have to mention, but I'll mention it when we talk about Amnesia. I think there's one thing that does detract from the experience of this game pretty heavily, because it doesn't force the player to do this at all. In fact, later in the game, I stopped doing it as often, but a player they have it in their brain that that's what they have to do. We'll talk about it. But I think if this part of the game were taken away or altered, it would be a better experience for it.
Okay.
But let's take a break real quick.
Yes,
if you don't have
I
anything
agree.
else.
No, I don't. Just want to make sure that I mention, guys, we've got a Patreon, $2 a month. Even that just means a lot to us. Really helps us kind of keep doing what we're doing here. But that gets you into our Discord community. Lots of fun stuff going on there. We have a lot planned for when we kind of start building that community up more. We're going to be doing, the monthly playthroughs that's, just for the community there. We're going to be doing some stuff where we're, scheduled events, fun things like that, maybe some live streams. So really hope you can join us there. But if not, we're also active on Twitter, all the other social media stuff. If you're watching on YouTube, we have podcasts. If you're listening to the podcast, we got YouTube videos of this stuff too. So just make sure you come check us out. We would love to share games with you in all of those spaces.
And we'll see you again real soon.
Yep. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Unpatched Gaming Podcast. We are done from break. We're going to talk about something incredible. We just talked about something incredible.
Yep.
But it's time to talk about another masterpiece, one of my favorite horror games, and that is Amnesia.
The Dark Descent.
Hey, my mic is way over here. Hey, folks.
Oh, now I can hear your lovely voice.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. This is your second time playing.
Yeah, I played right up to the end before in 2012, I think. And that was a very fun experience. I've never been more terrified. But I didn't finish it. I had to leave.
Yeah.
This is when I was in DTS. And yeah, I had to leave. I didn't realize how far I had gotten.
Yeah, you had like less than an hour.
I played it in 2 sittings, so I really breezed through that game. And yeah,
you had one scratchy old man penis to go, and then you're...
That's correct. Scratchy old man penis.
Yeah, lots of penis.
That's what we do
game.
here on Unpatched. We share scratchy.
So yeah, this is my first time playing it. I've never been interested in this game, which is stupid because this game's really good.
Why? That's interesting.
I understood the cultural impact and was like, that's cool, and moving on. Like, I just didn't give it much thought. No reason behind that. But
Okay.
I'm glad I played it. Very glad I played it.
Me too.
Basically, for the uninitiated, this is the game that kind of started the horror trend of you can't fight back. Right, that's kind of the main credit this game gets in a lot of ways, which is unfortunate because there's a lot more this game did than just that. So the game opens, and because it wasn't really a thing, it tells you right out the gate, you will not be able to fight back. Mm-hmm. You need to run, you need to hide, and if that fails, you need to run, And
it also says a couple other things, which is what I think is a detriment in Dead Space. It specifically tells you, don't worry about saving. Play in a dark room, immerse yourself as much as you can, and let the systems handle the saving. If just quit the game if you're done, we'll get you back to where you were.
Yeah.
And they specifically say that. But I think that the fact that there is a save point in every other room of Dead Space really takes away from that feeling of loss. Because there is checkpoints.
Isn't there the impossible mode, right, where you can only save 3 times or something?
That'd be great.
No, I think that's in Dead Space. I'm pretty sure.
I don't know. Later in the game, I stopped saving as often because I had to put that on myself. Like, now I feel like there's going to be loss. But even then, there's checkpoints pretty often.
Yeah,
and
it's pretty generous.
Yeah, I think it might be a little too generous on the default difficulty.
Definitely a blockbuster, you know, like please everybody kind of game, and I'm fine with it. I definitely see where you're coming from in terms of the horror experience, but as a game, I didn't mind it.
Sure, I think it would add a lot more to the stress of the game, because if you die, you don't lose anything. There's no stakes. There's nothing at stake.
Sure.
And if they could play with that a little more, I think it would be a better experience for it. Not that Dead Space is a bad experience, but I think that's really the main negative point for me.
That's fair. Let's just real quick, Amnesia, I want to run down the gameplay loop, because I feel like the gameplay loop is the main thing that was the big innovation. And this gameplay loop is very simple. You, as the player, are playing as Daniel.
Daniel.
And he's a really... You have amnesia, you gave yourself amnesia, and you are trying to put the pieces together, and you find the note from yourself to yourself that just says, you need to go kill the Baron Alexander. That's it. Like, he says, he's an awful man, just go do it. And so you are putting the pieces together, and the game leaves it to you to decide who's right, who's wrong, and what you should do at the end. But, that being said, the gameplay loop is what's really interesting, because the gameplay loop is primarily, you got your puzzles, so you have your puzzles that you have to solve, and sometimes there are challenges in the way of those puzzles, and sometimes it's just the puzzle. And these puzzles progress you from room to room. You move between the areas in order to get to the next main area to continue progressing through the game. But the main loop in that is that you have a light source, you have health. Both of those need to be managed. There's no inventory management, like in terms of like, oh, I need to sacrifice this or give this up. You can just, if you pick up oil, you can have as much oil as you can click on, essentially. But you have to conserve your lantern oil throughout the game. You have only a certain number of tinder boxes to light other light sources, and being in the light will keep you sane, but also make you easier to detect from the enemies, right? That's kind of the main loop that's present there. But what's interesting is being insane is not a detriment to you. Being insane will just kind of mess with your perception, and a lot of the game is messing with your senses, what you can hear, what you can see. Yeah. Right?
And I think a lot of the scares come from tricks and lies.
I agree, and I think it's really smart. They talked about in an interview, the player input and experience is more valuable to them than the systems they put in the game. So if they give you an insanity meter that does nothing, your input into that meter is what's more important to them, which is really interesting. It's kind of, a look behind the curtain. But let's say you find an enemy, and there's an enemy there, one of these grunts that, you can't fight back. It'll kill you if it sees you. You now have to, if you look at it, you'll go more insane. If you hide in the dark, you'll go insane. You just have to wait for it to go away, wait for it to not see you, and then continue to progress and try to solve the puzzle, get to the end of the hallway, what have you.
Yeah.
And that's the main gameplay loop. There is no combat, there's no anything. It's let me get through this alive and solve these puzzles.
Occasionally there'll be things you can pick up and like throw a bottle or something to distract the enemy.
Or sometimes you just, pick up some boxes to block a door, or you have to be creative and think of what would I do in this situation, because the physics are great in this game. You can pick up almost anything.
The physics are awesome, and a lot of the puzzles are physics-based puzzles, and I think up until the very end of the game, very intuitive.
Yeah, there was one that, there were a couple that I was like, come on, really? Like, that's what you want me to do? But still, I enjoyed them. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It did start to wear on me a little bit as you get to the end.
Yeah, towards the end of the game, it starts to become really gamey, and to its detriment, I think.
Sure, but the horror does not fade. I think
The horror doesn't fade, but the gaminess detracts from the whole.
I would
like
agree.
there's a little hub, there becomes a little hub area that you go back and forth between, and every time you go in, the one guy that's in that room is like saying the same thing.
Yeah. And, this game is extremely simple. There's not a lot to talk about in terms of what actually happens in the game. What we've described is basically the game. But this game is not remembered for being a great, gameplay experience. It is remembered for having a gameplay experience that supports one of the best horror experiences in gaming. Right? That's why we put it on masterpieces and not the indie hits. Like, it's just an indie hit. But at this point, with this much time, it is one of those games that influenced and changed a lot. One of those games that is held up as checking all the right boxes to be
Creating new boxes.
creating brand new boxes. Yeah, it's really cool. Picking up and throwing boxes in the
Yes.
physics engine.
Creating boxes and allowing you to pick them up.
And climb on them. And
Yeah.
there's a lot you can do in this game. It's really fun to, experience the little puzzles and stuff. But there were, unlike Dead Space, I wanted to come back and keep playing that game pretty much from the moment I started it. I wanted to keep killing necromorphs. It was so much fun. Amnesia did not call to me like that. In fact, there were moments where I explicitly said, okay, I'm done for now. It's definitely has all of its chips in the horror experience for that game. It does make you uncomfortable. It does make you hurt. I will say that no movie, no book, and no anything has made me, except outside of reality, has made me feel like the first time I started to get chased by one of the grunts. And what's interesting is the grunts don't look any scarier than any other horror design. The grunts don't do anything different. But I opened the door and I saw one right there in the room. And so I run away and I hide. He doesn't see me. I go to complete the puzzle and I come back in the room and I go, oh, the room he was in is empty. I bet there's some goodies in there. Some oil for my lantern, some more tinder boxes. So I sneak in there and I grab the stuff, and then he comes in to the room and he's right in front of me. I make eye contact.
Oh.
I turn around and I see him. Because they, you just hear him pitter pattering, they're not. And so I turn around and make eye contact. And when your character makes eye contact with, or even when he just sees them, his vision starts to fade.
Yeah.
And everything becomes blurry and harder to see. And you start hearing noises that aren't there. And I felt this, and I didn't feel it again the rest of the game, but this tinge throughout my body from that and it wasn't like immediate. It's this welling up from my stomach that went through my whole body, this electrical tinge of just fear. And I knew in my head, I'm not going to lose anything if I die. I'm not going to, nothing that is about to happen is going to be a detriment to me as a human being. But the sound, and because it's not like this dun, 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 it's just this like this weird sound, and it just starts ambling towards you, fast, but just starts moving towards you. And it's this presence, and the game has built for so long this atmosphere of your powerlessness, of your inability to do anything. And as it moves towards you, the utter moment of there is nothing left for me.
Yeah.
And you know what? I got away. I made it away. I managed to trick it and got away. But oh my gosh, that moment stuck with me. And years from now, it's going to be that moment that I remember in this game.
Yeah. The first time that it really got me, I mean, the monster did not get me, but I was terrified that I was gonna get got, was when you are in your own room.
Yeah.
You go back to visit your room and a monster comes in there and you need to hide from it. There's a couple things you can do. I get inside of a wardrobe.
Yeah, that's what I did.
But I had pulled some drawers out. So the wardrobe was already open. The entire room was ransacked. But I had pulled some drawers out looking for things. And I pushed a drawer in front of one of the doors so I couldn't
So
close
you're
it.
stuck.
I
Oh,
couldn't
no.
close it, and he was coming in. So instead of hiding behind the one door that I could close, I hid directly in the open because the open door was just blocking his vision, like that angle of his vision enough.
But see,
And like I could see his shoulder in there, and he was looking around, but he didn't come over to look inside of it.
dude.
Yeah, that was really good.
Because he comes in after it's triggered. Like there's a moment where he comes in, and I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this is what interested me most about this game is how do you initiate a horror sequence? How do you initiate? Because you can spend all the time building up that you want, but how do you actually initiate it? And many games are static. Mm-hmm. There is something that happens that triggers, and now you get jumped on, or now you get scared. The scare happens. Amnesia is built so much more on dynamic initiation, where every system and everything that the game is doing feeds into this central, moment of when you make eye contact, when something sees you, when X, Y, or Z happens. That's when the game cues itself and initiates this sequence. The best example I have is Resident Evil 2 Remake with Mr. X following you, where that one's far more complex, right? There's all this AI that goes into it, way more complex than this game.
Well, sure, it's also a decade old now.
Sure, but I'm saying that to Amnesia's credit, that it doesn't need all this craziness. But, Resident Evil 2 Remake is taking pretty much what, Amnesia's doing, and now there's the sequence that didn't happen for anybody else that happened for me, where I get caught. It's the only time where I have been playing a horror game, and I think I'm safe. Like, I've tricked him. Now he's left. I hear his boots stomping away. I don't hear his boots anymore, and I walk outside, and he busts through the wall and kills me. I probably could have gotten away, but I was just so... I've never just shouted, "Oh, expletive!" Like, just so... My wife runs in the room, "Are you okay? What's wrong?" Like, I got, like, hard.
Yeah.
And it's those dynamic moments. So it's cool how video games can establish systems in order to initiate a horror sequence that's not statically predetermined. And Amnesia does it without a big budget, without complex AI. The simple systems, and enemy here, maybe they'll walk in, hit this time, maybe they won't. It changes. They talk about that a lot in the development. It dynamically changes every time you're playing, every time you restart. Things won't happen the same way every time because you're insane.
Yeah, because you're insane. And something that I really appreciate is that when you die, you have had that experience, and it's not going to give you the same scripted sequence again. Even if it is a scripted sequence, it's not going to do it again because you've already had that scare. So maybe it wasn't even real in the first place. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, the narrative coherency, I guess, right? I love it. I think that to be able to do that on this scale is so incredible, and just the work and the time that went into making it that way. To initiate a horror sequence dynamically based on what a video game is and how video games are built, and still be able to scare someone consistently, that baffles me.
It's good stuff, man. It's really good. I want to talk about one other scare.
Yeah, talk to me.
I like this game a lot, by the way.
As you should.
It gets me, man. It really gets me. I was like jumping in my seat, screaming, which I've never done before. And I didn't do it on my last playthrough. And for some reason, like, I forgot how terrifying this was. Surprisingly,
I know it's
I remembered a lot of this game. I played it 8 years ago now, but a lot of it stuck with me. Just how terrifying the water monster is. It started chasing me, and everything came back to me, and I started running as fast as I can, trying to get out of the way, screaming and literally hopping in my seat. I've never done that.
Yeah, I did the same thing, man.
Absolutely terrified.
I did something very similar in that moment. It was probably a little more internalized, but I guess that's not fair. I'll say that was the real moment that made me, that scared me. It definitely didn't get me as the following moment, that more dynamic one.
Yeah.
But, man, yeah, the water monsters are... Ooh.
And the
characters
play with fear pretty well, like general fears. I think not seeing what is under the water is a very common fear that I've heard of, and roaches. Who likes to see a roach?
Nobody.
Not a person. Not a single person. If you do, we don't need you on this podcast, okay?
Wow,
You're a
no,
roach
you're
lover?
very welcome here. We're just here to
kidding.
we're here to help you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something they play with, and there's some more general fear like spiders is super common. They don't play with that here. I think roaches and fear of the water are maybe underutilized.
You know what fear, maybe not a fear, and anxiety that they play with. If you're going insane and your vision's blurring, there's this like teeth clacking.
Isn't that the roaches?
It is, but like the sound though,
Yeah,
is very. It's
very
not just
intense.
like a little pitter patter of roaches. It's
it's
like
as though they were in your
your
ear,
skull.
kinda.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a bug in your ear?
No,
It's absolutely the worst thing in the world.
I can
I had
imagine.
a moth get in my ear once and get stuck there, and so someone had to go to the store and get baby oil and bring it back, because I guess like water would make the moth expand, but just oil lets it slip out.
That's
So,
disturbing.
yeah.
As all get out.
it's the
But
worst.
yeah, but the sound that they play is reminiscent of like that teeth grinding clackety, which is incredibly anxiety inducing for most human beings. Yeah, I can't.
Put some
I
good
can't do it.
headphones on and just turn that up.
Yeah, it really gets you sucked in.
Another way they really play with some of the effects to some of the visual and auditory effects is you mentioned your vision, but also you like fall over and trip if you start to go insane. You can't see in the dark. The camera might be skewed and repositioned,
Or like
as though
even
you're
sometimes it'll
crawling.
just sway. Like
Yeah.
it's very like disorienting, which of course scares you. You are losing control of the situation more and more and more.
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic. It's really well done. But that kind of leads, I guess, into my thing about the anatomy of a scare. Like, what goes into building these scares? And obviously, that's a huge question that could spend years and years and years. Ryan Hollinger, one of my favorite YouTubers, talks a lot about horror, movies, and he has a lot of time where he talks about how different movies, build up these things and deliver on them, and how some don't. And I think, just to see the amount of content that he has, it would take us a long time to ever.
So I think I'll focus on this a lot more with our subsequent games, how those scares are built up.
Yeah,
And I think that's super
interesting.
important is the build up.
Oh, absolutely. I think delivery is secondary in most. And I think, how do you deliver on something, like in Resident Evil 2, where it just dynamically pops out? How is that? How are you getting the build up for that? And it's in the systems of the game. And how are the systems interacting? How the guy will leave and the footsteps will stop. The footsteps are to indicate you that he's chasing you so that you can know to run because you can't kill him. And like all these little bits that lead into a dynamic scare or even a static one. Like, in Dead Space, the developers talk about, you're walking forward and an enemy will spawn in front of you. And if you run away, running backwards, trying to shoot him, they'll spawn one behind you. And, and then the cool thing about Dead Space is they'll screech, right? They'll let you know that they're there. Which you'd think, oh, that doesn't scare me. It can't surprise me. Well, no, now it's not a jump scare. Now you, as a human being, are, I said
trapped.
this before, you are trapped. And it's activating those things that make it a horror game.
And I think Dead Space walks... I think it walks the fence line for like half of the game. Doesn't want to be action, doesn't want to be horror. And it's not until after that big boss fight halfway through the game that it decides. And because you unload most of your resources on this boss fight, you spend your money to get the ammo you need, and you spend most of your health packs. And now what do? Everything is ramping up, and you have just relinquished all of your control.
Yeah,
and that's when it really shifts focus.
Yeah, it's really well made. I like it quite a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad that you made me play Amnesia for this segment. I don't know if I would have without this, so I'm very grateful because I feel like it's contextualized a lot of games. Like I've played Outlast, right, and which is, in my opinion, definitely not as clean of an experience, but you see Amnesia's influence, right? You see it very directly. You see it in a lot of contemporary horror games. There was an audience there. It's like what the indie scene did for Metroidvanias, right? There's an audience that still wants these, and big publishers aren't really making them.
Unless Nintendo makes them, then you don't want them for some reason.
Yeah, because Tyler and I definitely are very butthurt about the Metroid sales, for sure. I get that. But no, to go back though, I think that it's very important to look at a game like Amnesia and see, the games that came of it and what they took and what they didn't. Like, I think, you look at, the shooter, the Doom clone, or like, I think a more contemporary example, the Souls like, right?
Yeah.
There's things that they take, that third person, the slow, the methodical, the heavy combat, the, very deliberate swings of everything. But you look at the things that get missed and get left behind, and you go, well, really, maybe you should have taken those things instead. You know what I mean? There are certain things, like in Amnesia, again, that dynamic scare, I think, is a huge portion. I think the focus on disorienting the player at very intentional times. I think the focus on, for a Souls-like, the focus on the grandeur of the encounter, the focus on the very subtle building of lore that, for most people who don't spend hours and hours and hours digging into it, is confusing and makes you feel even more lost in this massive space where you don't belong, toppling these gods and stuff. And to the balance of making you feel like you can beat these things, but when you have, to still not feel quite fulfilled that you did, those kind of elements that get left behind when a game inspires all of these similar games after it. So
yeah, I mentioned last week, I think it was. Yeah, last week we were talking about Observer, and I said, there's a lot of amnesia here in Observer, and that was based on my partial playthrough of Amnesia 8 years ago. But looking at it now, having just played those games back to back, I do think what they took from Amnesia was the wrong stuff to have taken. And I said that last week because I was thinking of the monsters and you having to like skulk your way through these, like the office that the monster was in.
Yeah, I like
that. No, it was fine. I didn't.
No, I mean the jack into for that specific segment.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I like that.
But any time that the monster is there,
sure, I agree. That was weak
the lesser
every
part
time.
of the
because it's
the
like
game.
frustrating too, and like the game isn't built for that set kind of play. I get that for sure.
That's what I was attributing to Amnesia, but
yeah, it doesn't feel like Amnesia at all. Really,
it doesn't.
Amnesia, you feel like when you get seen first, it is your fault for sure.
Yeah,
like it's
definitely
very much your fault. And when you get seen, you feel like for a moment you feel like there's nothing you can do. And even when there is something you can do, it's clunky and it doesn't always work. And you might just die. It's versus in Observer, you get seen, you die, you restart every time. You might get away in Amnesia, you might not. There's that uncertainty there. Yeah, you're right. It's interesting you bring that up as a comparison. I think that's absolutely valid.
What else you got on Amnesia, man?
Honestly, man, there's not much. I think that it's an extremely clean experience. Of the two games, I think we've really established this extremely diverse pick for horror right out the gate.
Yeah, I'm very happy with
There are those who would
very
be
happy
very
you played
happy.
both, man.
Yeah, and I think that anybody listening should experience both. Give both a try, and if you like one and don't like the other, then you'll have a very clear direction as we go through the rest of these games of what you think will resonate best with you, and hopefully why as well. I'd like to end, honestly, just talking about how can these both be horror games?
Well,
you know what I mean? Like, how are these two extremely different experiences both horror games?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how would you be able to draw those together?
Well, I think we've said a lot of that already. They both create very intense atmospheres, and they strip a lot away from the player. I think Amnesia does it immediately and very apparently, but Dead Space is... There's a very particular balance where the enemies are weak, you're just entering the ship, and your power level is very high. And as the game increases, even if you're increasing your weapons, your power level is decreasing while the enemy is increasing. When I say your power level, I mean the amount of control you have over the situation because of the resources are becoming
Yeah, dude, that
more
last level,
scarce.
I was at low health the whole time.
I really should finish it. I
Like,
just didn't have time, unfortunately.
and I'm using, like, I have been saving my cannon ammo. Like, I probably had 16, and I killed the final boss with one shot
Yeah,
left.
I think Dead Space is doing an incredible job of tricking you into feeling like you're becoming more powerful, but you're not. I I think that those two power levels are switching places as that game
Versus
progresses.
Amnesia, which is just flat. You're
Yes.
always empty. That's an interesting observation. I'm glad you pointed that out. But
So-
you're right. Both are crafting a player environment where you cannot, right? Where more and more, especially more and more in Dead Space, but as a flat line in Amnesia, you are limited. And well, no, you're not even a flat line in Amnesia. When you get more insane, it's harder to cope with each.
Sure,
You know,
but it never goes up.
sure, absolutely. Like, but it might dip and then go back to flat,
Yeah.
right? So that is interesting. Being able to play with horror as the the loss of power or just not having it. I like that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So they're both doing something there, just in different ways. I think they're both. I mentioned I had a bigger definition than you did in the beginning. Sound design is important in both of them.
Sure.
It comes to the budget, but the sound design in Dead Space is masterful. It's incredible. Sound
Yeah.
design in Amnesia is also incredible, but it is a smaller team,
It's subtler.
scrappier budget,
Yeah.
and it's subtler. Yeah, let's go with that.
It's
That's much
subtler.
better. Let's see. Both of them unsettling imagery and themes throughout.
Yeah,
And-
there's that moment in Amnesia where you are going into the torture chambers where spoilers ahead. I know some people, a lot of it is, Amnesia who haven't gotten to experience. I want to make sure they get to experience it, as intended. It's a very short experience. But you are
I don't think they can now that we've sort of lifted that veil and we've talked about the lies that the game is telling. you.
maybe, I don't know.
So
but
so go ahead, say what you want to say.
yeah, but I will. You're reliving, you're cranking up the torture devices that your
Yeah.
character had used before on people, and he's reliving their tortured screams. And
Oh my god!
But
some of
while
those
you're
torture
cranking it,
machines.
and they're using real torture machines like that actually exist, and there are diagrams of them on the wall that are real diagrams.
I had no idea that super sharp triangle or
Yeah.
pyramid rather.
Yeah, and
That's disgusting.
yeah, it's
I mean,
very-
so is a lot of it. Like one of them is just like someone strung up upside down and sawed from bottom to top.
yeah, it's a lot of
It's really gross.
It
doesn't show. It's not an explicit
no,
game.
not at all. It's just the sounds and
Yeah.
you actually activating the crank, and it's very, very well done.
Yeah. You had just said something I wanted to mention. Oh, the end of the game. Yeah, I didn't really mention much about the end of the game. Unfortunately, I think it becomes a little too gamey right there at the end. Too gamey for
Sure.
its own good. The puzzles really start to stack on. You've got that hub area, and until that point, I think it was pretty well paced. I think it comes to a bit of a halt right
That's
there
fair.
towards the end of the game, and then also at the end of the game, it shifts focus, I think, to become much more intentionally about the narrative than the horror, and the narrative is fine. It's the overall experience of the horror that really does
Sure.
it for me, and they sort of shifted focus there at the end of the game.
That's fair.
So it didn't hold me all the way through, unfortunately, but it is still pretty incredible. What else did they both hit? Sound design I just mentioned. Let's see. That's sort of like scrappy survival. So you've got the different
Making use
ways
of what you got.
making use of what you got, exactly. Let's see. The scarcity we've talked about already, and yeah, that
Yeah.
they check all my boxes here.
I think for me, Dead Space plays a lot more on evoking the fear that is a lot more primal, right? The thing that's behind you, the being surrounded, the inability to cope with the situation at hand. It's a lot more primal fear, but I think Amnesia does both, and does both as far as it can. You have that, all the primal fear stuff happening, but you have the existential fear too. The Amnesia premise, the like, why am I here? What is happening? Like, do I even have to be here? Why can't I get out?
Yeah, they really play with those expectations.
Yeah.
As the narrative goes on. When I say the narrative, I mean like piecing together his diary pieces, so you figure out who you are. It pulls you as the player, like your understanding of the character, in different directions.
Because like once you realize how awful your character, the person you're playing as, is, you kind of, and the character by extension is also realizing how awful the person he is.
Yeah,
you're like, I suck. Like, why am I even here?
But they then turn that again when you realize just how brainwashed you've been.
Sure, and like a lot of it is up to the player to determine how much of it is your fault and how much. So like, by the end, you're kind of like, why can't I just die? Like I suck. I suck as much as this guy that I'm trying to kill. Why can't I just die? Like, there's that existential stuff that happens there too that I think is really engaging. So for me, based on what I have as a definition so far, it both check the boxes. They engage that fear, either primal or more kind of existential. I guess existential is the wrong word, but that primal fear or that kind of stuff that requires a little bit more critical thought. Either of them, they hit one of those two or both and engage that and make you think in a different way, or experience an experience that's not available in something that would just be, a typical third-person shooter, or vice versa. So, yeah, they hit the right buttons, man. I'm excited to see kind of how the games going forward change the way we think about.
And so next week we've got two games that really I didn't think that you could do something like this in that format, and that's a side-scrolling horror game, which this I think came out after Limbo, but I played it before Limbo. And that is Lone Survivor.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got a top-down game being Deadwood. That one came out last year.
Yeah, the isometric
Darkwood.
style.
Darkwood, not Deadwood.
Yeah, I was about to say Deadwood's a TV show.
Yeah,
Darkwood, which is an isometric game. It's like, how do you do horror isometrically? But this is going to constitute our indie hits pillar, right?
Yes.
This is kind of the independent games that have made a splash and people seem to resonate with. So, of all the games we're playing, Darkwood is the one I'm most excited for.
Me as well. I'm very excited for you to play Lone Survivor. I think this will be my 5th playthrough of Lone Survivor.
I'm just excited for you to play Resident Evil 2 Remake.
Yeah, that's going to be our last.
This will be my third.
Week.
Yeah, this will be my third when I go play it again.
Yeah, finally, I will be playing a game that you have recommended.
Yeah,
because up to this point, it's been all my recommendations.
I'm saving them.
Oh. Yes, you are. You're going to hit me real hard.
Yeah.
But what are you anticipating to like or not? What do you think might be hard to please you? With the titles we've got lined up.
Sure. So we have some obscure games coming up. One of them is Rule of Rose.
Yeah. I got a copy of Rule of Rose, and what better excuse to play it than play it on the podcast? Like,
sure, yeah.
I spent the money on that game. I got to play it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're gonna play that. I think it's going to be very unsettling. I don't know how much I'm going to like it.
Yeah, same here.
I only know the theme. I don't know anything about the gameplay.
It's a PS2 horror game that's just expensive because it's obscure. That's kind of what I'm going in.
Yeah.
Of that genre, quote unquote, of the expensive PS2 horror game genre. Kuon looks incredibly interesting. Not only because it's FromSoft, but of all those, that one and maybe... what's the other one? Haunting Grounds.
Yeah, I got that one as well.
Yeah, you got that one as well. That one looks more interesting to me than Rule of Rose.
I don't know much about that one. That one looks kind of like a what is the Konami horror series? I draw blanks all the time.
Oh, Silent Hill.
Silent Hill.
Yeah, dude, I had a huge blank, which we intentionally left off.
Yes.
By the way, we should mention that for anybody who's like, "Where's Silent Hill? That's a masterpiece." You're correct. Silent Hill 2
we can't play all the games, but we got
explicitly because we're thinking about doing, because neither of us have played a single Silent Hill game, is doing 1 through 4 next year possibly. So we're really thinking about maybe making that the main focus next year. We intentionally left them out this time to kind of maybe address them as a whole series, faults and all, warts and all. So anyway, yeah, I think for me, definitely that's what I'm not looking forward to. Darkwood, like I said, I love isometric games. I know that's weird to say because they're so different, but games in isometric styles typically I don't know, they're engaging, they're interesting to me.
Yeah.
So especially as a horror experience, that's got me very excited to play Resident Evil 2 Remake. Yeah, I think that's kind of.
I think it's a Rule of Rose. That one is going to be such a toss up, and I look at games for their intrinsic value. So I'm not going to let the fact that I spent so much money on it cloud that.
Nor will you be disappointed in your purchase because keep
nor
looking at
will
those numbers go up.
Correct. I got a pretty good deal. And what is it? We just talked about Haunting Ground as well. I found that for $30 at half price books, which they're silly. That's a lie. Well, maybe their books are half price, they're paperbacks, but other things are not. Oftentimes they'll sell games at market value, but then sometimes I'll find a Haunting Ground, which at the time was $100 for like just under $50. So I got it, and now it has. That was like a year and a half ago, and it's expensive now.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Got anything else to add, man? We good?
Oh yeah. What is the one we're playing at the end along with RE2?
Yeah, Evil Within 2.
Evil Within 2. After talking about horror the way we have and exploring these two games, I anticipate that one to unfortunately be a letdown.
I don't know. The way that people who like it talk about it make me excited, especially considering the development team behind it and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking forward
it interests me a great deal. That's why I advocated putting it on the list. But after playing these two and sort of defining what we look for in a horror game, it could let me down.
Yeah, I don't know.
We'll see.
I'm still shaping my opinion of horror, so we're going to find out how this stuff fits in. But as always, thank you for joining us. We love sharing these games with you. Let us know. Give us a shout out, either on Discord, Twitter. Let us know what you think about these games. Let us know if you get a chance to play them. If this is your first time, we'd love to be able to have that experience with you guys. So as always, thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Love you. Bye.